Howdy, folks. Welcome back to Rabbit Hole Stories, yet another episode. And we've got another exciting guest for you today. It was Joe Hall. He's not such a nice guy, isn't he, Joel?
He is. And the good thing with Joe is he's exactly the same as he is in person on camera as well.
Yeah, no, I remember very briefly seeing him in Amsterdam and having a very brief chat with him, but I was instantaneously thought, yeah, you're a cool guy. I like you. And it was a pleasure having him on today. And we discussed, obviously, journalism and his role in that space of writing content for Cointelegraph and things like that and all the things around it. That was quite an interesting chat. What else did we discuss? Joel, can you remember?
The viewers.
There was so much we discussed. It was quite a lot in the episode.
I mean, one of the things that stuck with me was his different views on Bitcoin around different corners in the world, because he got to travel because of his older job with like Bloomberg. And now with Cointelegraph, he's obviously always out and about trying to send people sats. So that was, I think, cool as well to see that it's the way we perceive Bitcoin is very Westerny. And there are still a lot of countries who desperately need Bitcoin. It's like we live in a luxurious position over here in the West. And
absolutely.
So, that was quite big.
Yeah, no, he's obviously been around the globe and seen Bitcoin in different parts of the globe, so and how different it is in different places in the world. So that was quite a fascinating conversation. You're right. So we'll let people go in and enjoy the episode. So yeah, listen to it, enjoy, give us feedback as always, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care, guys.
Welcome back, everyone, to Rabbit Hole Stories with another exciting guest on today. You know the spiel. I'm Joel, here with my lovely co-host.
Hey guys, it's Ian here.
And today we have Joe Hall with us, or Joe Nakamoto. I'm never really sure how to introduce you, but I'm going with the full doxing name. We'll welcome you on the show, Joe. It's nice to have you here.
Cheers, Joel. Cheers, Ian. I am full send on Joe Nakamoto, but I'm also fully doxed with Joe Hall. So whichever way you put it, the cat's out of the bag. It's a bit like, Pleb Music and Max DeMarco, right? He's trying to recover his original name, whereas I'm trying to get the Joe Nakamoto name going. So,
you must have seen the clip as well, where he comes out, he's like excusing. I was like, holy shit, what has he done? And then you get the whole build up. It's like, oh, it's just a fucking name.
Yeah.
But are you actually registered with like your legal name at Cointelegraph, or is it Nakamoto in like your bylines?
When you say registered, like it's a crypto media publication. I don't think there's much legal stuff going on. I do their work and they pay me. It's even the nature of the contract with them is like a gentleman's handshake, which again is one of those things that draw me to work in the Bitcoin and crypto space. Sorry, I should have said trigger warning. I've said the word crypto like 3 times. You'll have lost like 5 listeners already. They'll be like, who's this shitcoiner? But yeah, so there's no there is like a 1-page contract in place, and it does say my legal name. It's like if I compare that to how my old like job contracts which were like 14 pages and all these things, it was quite weird and quite refreshing. But obviously all those pages are in place for a reason. At some point someone has taken the piss or someone has fallen onto bad times, and that's why they've got this extra addenda or appendix in there. So it's been interesting navigating working in the Bitcoin and crypto space. Yes, I am registered as Joseph Hall, but I have actually thought about trying to change it to Joe Nakamoto to make that more of like a brand.
Yeah,
work in
nice.
progress.
I just remember you got once picked up by The Guardian with a tweet, and like everyone was able to reply underneath your tweet how you should change your name. That was brilliant. Maybe we're able to link that tweet in the show notes.
It should still be there, which is, every time I change my display name on Twitter, because, it started off like light things, like The Guardian says, buy Bitcoin, and then progressively, I think we were chatting about it, and it ended up being like Epstein didn't kill himself. And,
Embracing the true conspiracy theory side of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But maybe for the listeners who are not in the know who you are, could you give us a brief introduction as to what you do and how you got on board into Bitcoin?
Sure, thanks. Thank you very much for having me on, guys. I'm currently at work, so if I suddenly drift off and just lack conversation or something, then I do apologise. But as my work, I am a reporter for Cointelegraph. I used to call myself like a full-on journalist, but I think I'm increasingly becoming like a content creator. And I think that the journalist word is a, we don't do a lot of investigative journalism at Cointelegraph, as it's just not that kind of outlet. And I've realised that sort of the hard way by trying to like deliver on scoops and this sort of thing, and realising that, they just don't have the resources for that, and they're not built out to be that kind of outlet. So I've focused, like my beat is effectively like human interest stories and sort of interesting comeback or underdog stories within the Bitcoin space. I try to write exclusively for Bitcoin, which I think is really important because Cointelegraph is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sort of crypto media outlets. And if you type in anything related to crypto into Google, Cointelegraph is always in like the top 3 results, if not the #1 spot. It's phenomenal for SEO. And it's really funny because that's quite widely understood in the Bitcoin world. People like Samson Mao and people like Corey Clipston are really keen to get their content onto Cointelegraph, knowing that it's shit Cointelegraph because of its reach. It's a phenomenal reach. Anyway, I'm going to stop shilling Cointelegraph now. But yeah, I started work for them like a year and a half. What am I on? Like a year and a half ago, something like that, maybe a bit longer. And when I sort of interviewed with them, I said, I want to write about Bitcoin, and I don't think they really believed me that much. And also I said, like, I want to do what I did previously, which was bounce around sort of developing countries. Because I used to work for like a Bloomberg subsidiary called Oxford Business Group. And with them, I was posted to sort of exotic countries around the world. And I said to them, I want to do this, but in the Bitcoin world. And again, I don't think they really believed me. And so like the month after my first job, my first like month there, as I'm going to Senegal, I've heard there was a story there. And they were like, okay, is there even internet there? And I was like, yeah, of course there is. And you forget that, a lot of people's idea of or concept of Africa or developing countries is like there's a stream and there's people washing their clothes in the stream, and that's that's the extent of it. And I came back with a bunch of stories from there, and since then they've like trusted me to like go to random places around the world and pick up stories and really try to connect with some of those amazing stories in the Bitcoin space, whether it's the first lady in West Africa to sell fish for Bitcoin, which is just kind of really fun. And she set up a little Bitcoin fishery business. Or it's, one of the stories this week was, it was like quite funny, was how a fella, Parman, the creator who you might know, who orange-pilled ChatGPT, or Decentra Suze, the lady that did the amazing article in City AM. Her son gave a Bitcoin talk at school, so I tried to orange pill his classmates. These kind of stories, they're like fun, lighthearted, and human-oriented. But just again, I see it as they serve as like positive marketing for Bitcoin, which is often destroyed in regular media for being like this faceless organization that's burning the ice caps. So yeah, that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. And then I also have my own sort of personal interests where I like to make sort of funny videos and try to just generally be a Bitcoin cheerleader. So I try to sort of give out free Bitcoin to people, to places I travel around the world. And initially I was doing it just for fun. And then I realized that it's an amazing way of sort of getting a sense of adoption in a place or a country. It really pushed me out my comfort zone, which I really like to do. And I realized that the Bitcoin community loved it. And I'm sure you guys have realized that, the second you start throwing stuff into the Bitcoin community, you're like, oh, wow, people are getting something from this. This is great. Like, I'm going to keep going and keep, working harder at it. So it's, as with Bitcoin knowledge and Bitcoin learning, it's also very addictive. So you can end up spiraling and working ridiculous hours, which is what I'm doing at the moment. But, it's fun and it's worth it. And I do feel like I've convinced myself, that I'm contributing something of worth to the world and to the space. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Mate, I had yesterday, like 2 a.m. or today, essentially. I couldn't sleep. I was like, my Bitcoin books look a bit weird in my bookshelf. Let's just reorganize them at like 2 a.m.
Wow.
My neighbors must think I'm like a fucking psychopath. But like, yeah, they look nice now. So they're like organized by category and stuff. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
I need details. What categories did you split them up into? Is this like macro, philosophy? I don't know.
Essentially, yeah. I think like I did macro philosophy, sort of. I wouldn't call it third world stories, but sort of human rights stuff. And I think mining is probably a big portion of the books. I still need to read upon them.
Nice. Sorry,
My organisation skills are all over the place. My Bitcoin books are they're like spread across different places, and I'm just looking them. I'm at my office at work at the moment, my fiat mining job. So I'm taking advantage of the time for Bitcoin here, so they can go fuck themselves. But I've just seen I've got the cover for the Bitcoin Standard just laying on the shelf somewhere. I've just got like a random book somewhere else hidden away here that I'm just bringing to work. Yeah, so
nice.
Forget organisation when it comes to my Bitcoin books. They just go wherever I go, and they're half read somewhere here and there. So yeah, you're more organised than I am, Joel.
I've just realised the question I asked you is kind of like a team building, like a Bitcoin icebreaker question. So how do you organise your Bitcoin books at home? It's a bit like asking someone like how they stack their dishwasher. I'm really sorry, listeners. I promise I'm more interesting than this.
But you are, Joe. I mean, what I was going to say is that the work that you are doing for Bitcoin is phenomenal, in my opinion, because you're bringing the human into Bitcoin. You're going out there and you're having real life conversations with real life people, and you're sort of having these just frank but open discussions with people. You're very open and warm, and you're open to hearing the other people's opinions and their and how Bitcoin is or isn't working for them. And I know that in the past you might have got some stick for working for what people consider a shitcoin outlet, but what I think they fail to sometimes forget is that the signal that you're putting out there in this, and you put it out there that they're one of the main outlets for the crypto space. So the noise that you're providing is going to be amplified more than just, working for some other sort of obscure outlet somewhere else. So.
Oh, thanks, mate. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it does. Being a Bitcoiner at a shitcoin publication or a company does come with a lot of hurdles, let's say. And it's funny because I've since sort of made friends with other maxis that work at like CoinDesk or that work at I'm trying to think of whether I don't really know many guys at Bloomberg or CNBC that I'm not close with them. But at CoinDesk, there's this guy called George Kaludis, who's like a maxi, and it's funny how when CoinDesk released their top 100 people in crypto last year, and it was like
and everyone freaked out. Yeah, because no Bitcoiners were on there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So George caught loads of slack for that, and it was like he's just a reporter, he's not the CEO. And it's funny because I'm currently overseeing the top 100 of Cointelegraph at the moment, and obviously, so I wrote like Nayib Bukele's profile, and I was like, yeah, I really want to write that one. And there was a few other profiles that were like Bitcoiners in it, and I helped to write the taglines and like the catchphrases for those ones. But then when I looked through the rest of the list, I was like, I've got to hold my hands up here. I have no idea who these people are. Like, who is this person from this crypto project? Like, I like to be up to speed with these things, but for a lot of them, I was like, I don't know what this is. And I know that when the list gets released, it'll be like, what are you doing?
Pandemonium.
Yeah, like, I thought you were a Bitcoiner. I mean, it happened the other day. Like, we had an article published about Craig Wright, and
Fuck him.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I've brought him up already now, so that was the one thing we're not going to talk about. Fuck. But yeah, literally fuck that guy. And everyone in the Bitcoin space knows that this guy is evil or mentally unwell, or maybe both. And so we had like this article that was obviously like a clickbaity kind of thing that was like, here are the 7 people who could be Satoshi Nakamoto. Like classic sort of evergreen content for Bitcoin, for crypto, for people new to the space as well. The article's always going to do well. And, you've got the usual suspects in there from, Adam Back to, Craig Wright, unfortunately. And I basically argued that we shouldn't have Craig Wright on our platform at all because it's not a good look within the Bitcoin community. This guy is going out of his way, if anyone's not up to speed with who Craig Wright is, like he claims to be Satoshi, and anyone that says he isn't, he takes them to court, sues them, and makes their life a misery. And he's done this so far to Hodler, and he's done it to Peter McCormack, and anyone that goes in his way, he will block them, i.e. Joel. I'm now actually blocked as well, so I'm joining the Craig Wright block brigade. So I tried to be like, guys, I think this looks really bad. And then they published the article, and Hodler Naught DM'd me being like, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to make a scene of this effectively. And I was like, shit, let me try my hardest to try and get this revoked. And I didn't. I failed. And no matter how hard I try to explain, I don't think we should put Craig Wright on our platform. they continued with it anyway, and then it ended up being like a discussion between Hodlonaut and our editor-in-chief on Twitter, and Hodlonaut basically was like, I want to cancel Cointelegraph because of this, and I completely understand why he'd want to do that.
This is why it's important that you're working for Cointelegraph, because you're providing the voice on behalf of a lot of Bitcoiners. So you're trying to put the signal out there that maybe some communities aren't aware of, and you by being in that position in this shitcoin telegraph, whatever you want to call it, you know, you're there as a representative for us. So thank you.
No, not at all. And when I say shitcoin telegraph, I mean it endearingly. Like, obviously they're my employer, and
of course, absolutely.
I've got some friends there. But,
much love to them. Much love to them.
And the other thing I'd just say is that, okay, while I'm doing a good job and stuff, you should also like put me under the microscope and scrutinize me and my actions, because there are no heroes in Bitcoin, and if you do have a hero, well, you can have some fun slaying them at some point as well, because we're all just human and we're all stumbling through this. And it's sorry.
You get a lot of Bitcoiners though having their favorite sort of influencer, and like no matter what happens, what they do, or what they say, it becomes gospel, and I think that is sometimes a bit of a dangerous territory to go down.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I saw it a bit with Corey Clipston last year, who I have like massive respect for, and you know he did an amazing job calling out all these scams and Ponzi's last year, but we're also putting him on a pedestal, and it almost became like, you know, here comes Corey, and I mean you see this with a lot of people, and the more we big them up, the bigger the eventual fall will be. It's the beauty of Bitcoin, though, right? That everyone can at any point be on the chopping block, and we're seeing that play out at the moment with the ordinals and the inscriptions and things. So
yeah, which is definitely on the agenda for us. But just to get back what you said, that's actually what a lot of people, doesn't really have to be in Bitcoin only, but like outside of the media landscape, don't know about. Immediately when they hear, yeah, you're a journalist or you work in media, it's immediately like, oh, you're always lying. They have no clue how hard it sometimes is behind the scene to like pitch your story, to come up with original ideas. Yeah. You mentioned investigative journalists before. I have a few friends who are, and I mean, if Bitcoiners are good with like, you know, living off basically noodles and just walking around with the same t-shirt each day, these guys are like aliens and the experts to survive on like 10 grey t-shirt on like 10 pounds.
I missed that. What is it?
Panties for Bitcoin.
Go on then.
Free t-shirts. Like, it's a bear market, so I'm surviving off my free t-shirts.
Yeah, obviously. But I think it brings up a good point what you mentioned. It's not always just because someone works at, like, let's call it the enemy. And for the listeners in the audio form, I'm doing like quotation marks between enemy. Because it's hard. It's hard to convince everyone immediately. And I like that you brought up the Slay Your Heroes thing, because this is what we're trying to do with the podcast. I written a post a few weeks ago, which I cut some slack on Twitter for with DMs, where I said I wouldn't categorize myself as a maxi. I'm more of an enthusiast. Like, I only hold Bitcoin. That's the thing in crypto. Let's just call it that case, because people will associate it with crypto, which I believe in. And I think it's good to believe in something, because you have your values, your morals and stuff. And like, you know, what are all these big investors always saying? Like, only invest in what you know. So if you look at it from an investment standpoint, why shouldn't I invest in something I have no fucking clue about? Like the 110 people you said in crypto. And I think that's an issue for a lot of, especially us Bitcoiners. We immediately think, oh, they are in Bitcoin, they must be doing good. And I mean, obviously there are people who want to harm and want to do something else. So it's good to have that mindset that sometimes you're going to question what you read on Twitter. Especially on Twitter.
I actually read that article. I thought it was pretty fair. Like, you know, I mean, I struggle with the word maximalism at times as well, and I'm always like, I'd rather be like a Bitcoin minimalist, maybe, or because even when you talk to, I mean, I asked Safety and Amus this in a conference in December. Someone from the audience asked, like, what happens if something comes along that's better than Bitcoin, And he was like, well, basically, I think we'd end up adopting that. This is like to completely condense his very long-winded and very, you know, well-reasoned answer into just a line. But he basically said that, there could be something that comes along that's better than Bitcoin. I mean, lots of people have tried to make something that's better than Bitcoin. A lot of them is like a token or a shitcoin or whatever. But there could be a new concept that we haven't discovered yet and haven't invented yet because we just haven't thought it up. But, you know, I draw sort of inspiration or security, I guess, from people like Adam Back trying to spend, you know, months and months trying to hack this stuff. or back in 2012 was it? And he was like, there was no way of improving the level of decentralization without compromising on the security or whatever. So yeah, I think it's important still to keep this open mind and to not be just completely black and white and dogmatic about this is Bitcoin and this is shitcoin. I get that tokenization is like pretty evil, but what if there is another way of doing money that we haven't invented yet? Because we're in this amazing age of exponential invention on digital means, like on the internet. Like if people told you there was going to be Bitcoin and Nostr and all these things that we have right now, which we take for granted, then what does the next 10 years look like? The next 20 years look like? So I think that it's still important to keep that open mind. But I don't know, the whole maximalist camp. Maybe I'm referring more to the toxic maximalist camp.
I think you're right because I think I've said this before. We've been open-minded enough to open our minds and accept Bitcoin, so we should continue being open-minded and sort of keep our eye on the landscape, see what's going on, and just absorb it and know it for what it is. But then when you sort of become hard-nosed at it and you lock your you become kind of toxic within that, you shut yourself off from ever progressing again in the future. That's my mindset. I don't know if you share that in any way, but
yeah, I know that the idea of like creating a token is just you're creating a money, and inevitably there's going to be some unfairness with that. The fact we can't have this accidental discovery ever again. Obviously Satoshi made Bitcoin with the promise of it would have wealth one day, but it was also an experiment that everyone thought was like stupid when it started. There's only really Hal Finney that trusted in that. A couple of days later was like, no, let's give it a go. And he did mine for like 2 or 3 days without there being any monetary value to it. He was just expending energy for the 50 Bitcoin per block back then. So I think to have this accidental discovery of money, it's like maybe we discover a new element that's like a better money. Like I don't know, I'd have to smoke a lot of weed or take a lot of shrooms to understand what is this new money going to look like.
No, but obviously there's a lot of truth to that in a matter that I think a lot of us forget that it wasn't an invention. I think Satoshi didn't come out to say in 15 years it's going to be worth, I don't know, 20 grand a Bitcoin. It really was a discovery, and born out of that discovery, sort of the grassroots movement kicked in. And especially if you go into like the earlier days where you read the messages between like the Cyberpunk list when Satoshi was exchanging with them, a lot of them like played the idea down, like, no, we tried digital gold, it didn't work. And this is all context I think a lot of maxis, especially toxic maxis, are missing. And I'm completely on board with you. Like, everyone can do whatever they want, but like, just don't go out with the intention of like shoving
scamming
opinions and stuff down people's throats. Yeah, scamming, whatever it is. There are also scammers in Bitcoin, which is something a lot of people forget. So
that the hard way. There's a lot of people that do have ill intentions in the Bitcoin space, and I mean it's funny. I did a YouTube interview thing with a guy, like an Australian content creator who I thought was like a Bitcoin casher recently, and I kind of did it out of curiosity, and he basically wanted to dunk on me about Lightning and about how it's like a failure. And we set up a wallet live on his YouTube stream, and like I sent him sats from here, and it all worked smoothly. And I was kind of like, this isn't going very well, mate. But he kept coming back to me. Like, he's been in the space or around the space for like 7 or 8 years. So inevitably, he's lived through the block size war and the soft fork that came off the back of that. And he was sort of asking me like, and I'm relatively new to the space, when I compare myself to other figures and people that I look up to in it, and only really started taking it seriously, properly seriously, early 2020. Like in 2019, I was buying Bitcoin, but I had no idea what I was buying, and I was like sat on Coinbase watching the price go up and down like an idiot. So if you're doing that at home, just stop it, go outside, enjoy your life. Price action is eventually going upwards at some point, but that's the whole point. So he's been doing this, for 7 or 8 years, and he'd seen this Bitcoin Cash fork. And, he got the Bitcoin Cash coins. You were around back then, weren't you, Joel? I feel like you've been in the space a while.
Yeah, I basically, I did the whole, I think Knut spoke about it in his episode about this. He wrote like a guide how you got your cash, and then I just got them and basically exchanged them. I think I bought the laptop. I
Nice.
didn't save. I did the bad thing. I didn't invest it back into Bitcoin. But yeah, I was around then, and yeah, it was a completely different time for sure.
Yeah, and he was basically sort of saying like, do you not know the history of Bitcoin? Do you not know like the importance, like the significance of these events? And it did raise an interesting question for me. Was that like, yeah, my understanding of all these periods in Bitcoin history is through books or through scrolling on Twitter or through like people podcasting it, and I think it really does take away from the lived-in experience of. I mean,
Yeah.
when I read the block size war, I was like, holy shit, that sounds so stressful. Like you've got your life savings or your career built on this invention, and people are literally going at it to try and increase the block size and, you know, hard fork Bitcoin. Like, I think once I read Block Size War, that was when I was like completely convinced that no one can shake this thing, because it really did capture how close Bitcoin got to changing and moving away from this sort of ossification process that it's trying to enter into. So yeah, if anyone's reading and hasn't read The Block Size War by, I think it's Jonathan Beer, who actually met last year in Edinburgh. He was at the Edinburgh conference, which was really cool. Then yeah, it's a really good book to read, and it's a really good book to read right now if you're struggling with conviction around this funny digital technology, because for me it really helped, and it helped clarify these things. But my point was about the lived-in experience and the fact that yeah, when you're just looking back on these times and reading it as like an observer, it's very different. And that's kind of also why I like asking questions to people that have been around the space for so long. Like John Carvalho lives in Lisbon, Obi Nwosu lives in Lisbon, and you know, these guys were actively participating in the block size war, which is kind of cool, right? It feels like it's ancient history, but it was like 7 years ago. It's weird, right?
I mean, in Bitcoin years, that feels long.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, well, yeah. Maybe one day I'll be considered an OG for, you know, buying Bitcoin in 2019.
Yeah. So you've probably got on board 2020. How did you discover Bitcoin then, Joe?
Well, the first time was buying stuff on the Silk Road when I was like 18, 19. And I got really frustrated with Bitcoin. I was like, what is this useless technology that I've got to wait 20 minutes for it to confirm? What's all this about? And it was really hard to get your hands on. And I basically ended up giving up. And my friend, who's actually still around the sort of Bitcoin and crypto space, he was like the main sort of driver for the use case of Bitcoin back then. But it was kind of cool, but I was more excited about the Silk Road than I was about Bitcoin. Because, you know, if you wanted to like smoke a bit of weed or, you know, do some shrooms or whatever, then, you know, the old fashioned way is get in someone's car and like shit your pants a bit because you're a teenager. And no one wants to do that, right? It's just a bit of weed. In most places, well, some places around the world now, it's legal. So I hope I'm not ostracizing listeners with my sort of like liberal approach to plants. But yeah, so I learned about it back then and thought it was naff and was like, this is, you know, not interesting. And there was another touch point in 2017 when people were talking about it in the office at the job that I worked at in London. And that was actually when I was living around the corner from Ian, near Hammersmith. And again, it was one of those things. Like, oh, this weird token is, you know, going up in price. And there's some discussion about ICOs, but I was too cynical and too skeptical to be like actually interested or even invested. And then it came round to early 2019. Well, I started to learn about it, but realised that it wasn't a scam when I was living in the Ivory Coast doing a job there. And the driver of it wasn't a flamboyant thing having a driver. It's just natural if you're doing these projects in a lot of places around the world. He would, you know, take me to work every day, and he was receiving money from his son who lived in Paris. And I was like, this Bitcoin thing, people are actually using it as a means, you know, a tool to improve their lives. And because it was cheaper, faster, more secure than Western Union, and he could, you know, hold it himself. Whereas if you wanted to send euros to the CFA, which is like the West African franc, then it would have taken, I don't know, maybe like a few days to send it over. And on top of that, you would have lost maybe 20% in terms of fees and the fluctuation of the currency as well. So yeah, he sort of set me on this realization that, oh, maybe I'm wrong about this Bitcoin thing. Maybe I should, you know, suspend my preconceived ideas about this technology. And then, yeah, I don't know what inspired me, but it must have been price action, I guess, in like late 2018, early 2019. I opened up a Coinbase account and started to buy it. And I distinctly remember being on the roof of my flat in Trinidad and Tobago, like this small island at the bottom of the Caribbean. and it being like beautiful sunny day, like 30 degrees, and I was like, I just done like some yoga or something and was like about to work out, and I was there like gripped, like looking at this candlestick chart on my Coinbase Pro account, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I, like, it was also like, it wasn't even trading. I had like a couple £100 in it, which was, some money, but not, enough to be like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this for the rest of eternity. And at some point I stopped the trading thing, and just started buying a bit more regularly, and thought I had like, conviction. But then, I don't know if you remember the 2019 run up and then the crash, it went up to like near 10K or something, and then basically halved in a couple of days. And so obviously I didn't know what I was doing, so I sold the bottom. I was like, fuck this Bitcoin thing. Went back to my normal life, and then I think I had left like maybe £100 in that Coinbase account, and it took me till I think like September or October of 2019 before I started to actually get conviction. And then finally COVID was like the nail in this coffin, which was probably more nail than coffin at this point, because I had so many touch points and so many opportunities to learn about it, but just didn't properly plunge in. And then it was COVID when I went down the rabbit hole and was downloading Bitcoin into my brain. And I basically lost my job at the start of the pandemic, got sent home from Tunisia with my tail between my legs, and was quite depressed about it all. And thought, well, now is the time to properly learn about money, about finance, about how to never get into this problem or this situation again. Because for me, it was like a real tangible experience of, oh God, this is what it feels like to be completely like, on your own financially speaking. And I actually had to move in with my parents, which obviously sucks because 26 or 27 years old, thinking that I was like relatively successful, bouncing around the world, and then, got sent home without pay, without job, and took up residence in what used to be my old like teenage bedroom. So that sucked. And got a job in a factory around the corner from me, putting musical instruments into boxes. But the advantage was that I got to wear big headphones like Joel's wearing, and with sound cancelling, so it it masked all the sort of swearing and banging of stuff around me, and meant that I could just go, through Bitcoin podcasts from A to Z and really get orange pilled, so to speak. And that's when I started picking up the books as well. So in a way, it's thanks to the pandemic that I am here where I am now. But that's also because I'm an eternal optimist and try to see the bright side of these situations as well. Like the pandemic.
Yeah, what's that saying? When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And it seems like exactly what you did. You took advantage of a situation where some significant changes were happening. You already heard about Bitcoin. You were kind of already invested in it, but you decided to plunge yourself down that rabbit hole. And obviously, if you're fully down in that warren somewhere of the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So yeah, that's interesting.
But if like a psychoanalyst was to look at my story, they'd be like, oh, of course he latched onto Bitcoin because, he didn't have much else going on in his life. This, and that's something I do wonder sometimes. I'm like, is it that Bitcoin really works, or is it that we're just really looking for the solution and this way of hoping about our future and our existence? Like I recently started reading Audible, listening to The Mandibles, and it's this horrible projection of the future in 20 years' time. It's amazing, right? But it's so depressing, and it's so close to being a reality. And so I'm like, thank God for Bitcoin. Then I'm also like, God, before Bitcoin, I was quite depressed about our future. So maybe it's, maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on this Bitcoin thing to solve all our, humanity's issues. And, the Bitcoin fixes this meme is a very strong one. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, shit, maybe I'm falling into the trap of thinking that Bitcoin's going to make everything okay and rosy in the future. So, I have to check myself sometimes.
Yeah, I actually, I'm going to sound like a complete prick. And for the people watching the video, even having a Patagonia West on completely fulfills that picture. But I had lunch with my parents, dinner with my parents yesterday in Canary Wharf. In a very fancy restaurant called Roka, where you get Japanese, super spicy, nice food.
Nice.
And it immediately brought that image back to me, because you were mentioning, like, we sort of were depressed or don't have much going forward. But if I then looked around all of the bank employees around me, I think they had client meetings after work and stuff as well. Isn't that the case for like everything in life? Whether you be like working in the finance world or whether you're a journalist, I guess, at one of the big newspapers, as soon as you probably leave your journey or your environment a bit, I feel like everyone starts losing hope in some way, shape or form, unless they're like the super eternal optimist all the time or, always high on weed. I don't know. you sort of go down either way.
We all have to have those things which keep us going, right? And
yeah,
you know, it could be, but I don't know about you guys, but I found that it's not that Bitcoin is my calling. Maybe it is my calling, but you know, helping people understand it and educating people about it and sort of brushing off this negative reputation really does give me meaning. And I found that through my job, I am much happier doing what I'm doing and much happier putting in the hours in and, you know, just contributing in the way that I can because I believe in this movement behind me. And I've never been in this ideologically driven position or pursuit before. And that sort of thing that makes me wonder, oh gosh, have you fallen into this trap of being, you know, my dad actually had a chat to me recently where he was like joking around about it. And, you know, he stacked some stats and he recently learned how to properly take self-custody. And I'm very proud of him. But at the same time, he was like, you know, you remind me of those evangelical preachers that I used to hang around with when I was 19 traveling around Australia. And I was like, shit, because I really try to tone it down when I talk to normal people. Like with you guys, I can be like evangelical and like, Bitcoin is hope. But with normal people, I really do try to be like, because, you know, if you say, Bitcoin solves climate change, people are like, all right, bro, chill out.
No, it causes it. That's the first response.
Yeah. No, it's a constant struggle because when you've invested those 10,000 hours or you've come to these realizations because of Bitcoin, you then, you know, can't help but sort of, when the topics come up, sort of like the urge to sort of like bring Bitcoin into the conversation is the difficult one to rein back in sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've all had that situation with partners or friends where they just give you that look, like, don't.
Oh God, I've been around the dinner. I've been around a dinner table too many times where my missus is just looking at me like, "Don't." And I'm like, I won't.
It's the meme of the couple that's out to dinner and the dog's there and they've got the hand over the dog's muzzle, being like, you know, don't tell them about how, you know, the world's financial system is built on a lie and all this sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I always have the fun discussions with two bank friends of mine. Well, one actually works at a bank, the other one works in a fintech. And we always end up at like, well, if you look at this way, everything is a Ponzi scheme. So I think you like either have the very normal discussions and you're trying to like orange pill a normie, or you completely fall down the other option and you go down like the fiat is a Ponzi scheme. I obviously hear Bitcoin is one. I respond like central or fractional reserve banking is one, right? So I think if you end up in one or either camp, you're either very happy and unknowing, or you sort of think you know it all, but you're depressed all the time. So try and choose the camp you want to live in, guys. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, can relate.
Joe, what I'm interested in is that you spend quite a lot of time traveling around the world. And I see you on socials all the time, and you're just like, you seem to be everywhere. I'm intrigued. Something I've always been curious about is how Bitcoin is in each of these different places. Is it different? Is like the tone different from place to place? I know you spent quite a lot of time in El Salvador recently. What's the general kind of attitude around Bitcoin across the different parts of the world?
It's amazing, right? Because it does vary dramatically, and it's often quite surprising. Like in Bitcoin land, in El Salvador, sorry, I was amazed at. So firstly, like Bitcoin is completely recognized there. Like everyone knows what the Bitcoin B is. Everyone knows what Bitcoin does, that it's money. And that in itself is like an amazing +1 for a country. Because if I compare that to Biarritz, you know, in France, Southwest France, like France, Bitcoin adoption is shocking. You know, you can walk through a town carrying like a giant Bitcoin B and, you know, doing all sorts of stuff related to Bitcoin, and people just think you're a madman and wouldn't have any idea that it's related to Bitcoin. Like I had... there's a couple of videos that I did, one for my own channel and one for Cointelegraph's channel. And I think in one of the clips, this lady's like, "Oh, I recognize that. It's like the B of my bracelet." And I'm like, "No, it's a decentralized money. Like, what's going on?" And you know, she's being really friendly and nice. She's trying to relate to me, but she's never heard of the word Bitcoin before. In St. Lucia, where I've got hopefully a video coming out in the next couple of weeks. Fortunately, my girlfriend's dad took us on holiday there. As I'd never be able to afford it myself, and I couldn't resist doing a street video there. And again, I was like, "Can I send you some Bitcoin?" And they're like, I don't want no Bitcoin. And I was like, no, I didn't call you a bitch. Sorry, bit, hard T, coin. And, went on like this. And I was like, how have they never heard the word Bitcoin before? Like, I know we're in a bubble and we're in this great big echo chamber where we think that, adoption is at 100 million people around the world already. But it's really not, And of that 100 million people, like, there's probably 1 million that are actually, like, custodying their keys. Most people are just, stacking sats on some Coinbase exchange and dabbling in some shitcoins here and there. Like, it takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of conviction to get to that level where you genuinely think, okay, this is the next world's reserve currency. We just kind of get blinded sometimes by the Twitter effect and, the echo chamber effect. But yeah, so I think that, to answer your question, sorry, to go back to it, where has been like the best place for Bitcoin adoption? Probably like Switzerland is very, very high for that sort of thing. The US as well. I mean, the US has the best sort of on-ramps into Bitcoin. It's probably the easiest place to like sort of go from zero to Bitcoin quite quickly. Like Cash App has integrated Lightning, for example. Like most people in the US have Cash App. That's kind of huge. But I doubt that people are actually sending Bitcoin there because it's a taxable event and a lot of people are really wary of that. So I think that in some jurisdictions, they're pushing for adoption in ways that maybe don't fit their current sort of problems. Like, in the US, it's a different narrative to how it would be in, say, El Salvador, and a very different narrative to how it would be in, I don't know, Puerto Rico. So I think that also plays into it. And then the other thing I've realized through my videos is that when you're doing street videos, culture comes into play a lot. For example, in Switzerland, it's a much colder culture than, say, El Salvador, which is more Latino and like happy to talk to random people on the street. Before you know it, you'll be singing a song with someone. Whereas in Switzerland, most people are like fuck off home. Like, I do not want you, this tourist in my country. So that's been quite eye-opening as well, and an unexpected but funny consequence of trying to sort of suss out adoption in places around the world.
Whereabouts, in which part of Switzerland were you? Was it just Lugano?
Yeah, just Lugano. I did 4 different spots in Lugano because I got a couple of like angry people not interested in me talking to them, and it's the Italian side of Lugano as well, which you'd expect to be a bit more extrovert because the Italians, like, I'm obviously stereotyping here. I'm really sorry, guys, if there's any like really woke listeners, but like Italians generally tend to be a bit more warm and welcoming than, say, Swiss or Swiss German or Brits even. I don't consider Brits to be the most warming and welcoming culture as well, especially if you compare it to like a Colombia or something, right?
We're a miserable lot over here.
There you go. Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, next time Joe is in Switzerland, I have to take him like into the Swiss German speaking parts because it's 10 times worse there than it is in Lugano. So
yeah, exactly.
And what I really like about your work, Joe, is you actually bring in a very valid point. You brought up Cash App, for example. I personally believe that is the quickest way for, let's call it mass adoption, or a lot of people using Bitcoin through these intermediaries. People will pay with their debit card and use the Lightning Network, for example, but they have no fucking clue what the Lightning Network is. I mean, they don't even know what the Visa and MasterCard network is, so why should they know the other one? Or they will hold some form of custodial service, probably, where they'll be able to quickly exchange their Bitcoin into sats. The Bitcoin into fiat, sorry. Have you seen maybe like the regions around Africa and South Central America where people, if they got Bitcoin, become a bit more aware, like, okay, maybe there's more to this story than just like, the wallet I have on my phone? Or are they generally quite happy and like, oh yeah, I know how Lightning works, but I don't really want to spend more time in it? Or is it just that vastly different?
It does just so depend on the country. I mean, like, I thought it was really interesting last year, the narrative about Bitcoin in Africa. A load of like really big name Bitcoiners went to like a very small African country where there is some Bitcoin adoption and said that Bitcoin in Africa is the next big narrative. And it's like, guys, like Bitcoin is illegal in like 6 countries in Africa. Like there is no Bitcoin in Africa. There is Bitcoin within certain territories or certain regions. But it's like lazy to just like look at Bitcoin in Africa and be like, oh, it's going to take off. Like Morocco, where I literally tried to orange peel people in Morocco for 4 weeks last year. I got 1 story, which was bang average, and I found 1 security guard who actually stacks sats. But most people don't want to talk about it because it's illegal. And so obviously they don't want to talk to a journalist about it. They definitely don't want to talk about it on camera. So if you think about that and the other regions of Africa... Oops, sorry. My Siri just was talking to me. That's weird. Sorry. The legality of it is obviously a big hurdle, and that's going to stop any kind of adoption to Bitcoin. And if I compare that to Tunisia, again, that was I was laughed out of offices for bringing up Bitcoin there. So it really does vary depending on where you are. I don't think there's like one standout country within Africa, although South Africa probably would be it. Given that you've got so many Bitcoin communities there that are doing really good stuff and are doing it grassroots, and on top of that, you seem to have a couple of like big announcements for this year anyway. Like Pick n Pay is like a big retailer there, and now they're supposedly accepting Bitcoin and Lightning at all their stores. Although I'm not sure how well that rollout is going. And the other thing is that pushing the payments narrative or pushing the payments way of adoption is useful, right? But I don't think a lot of people see Bitcoin as a payments technology yet. I use Bitcoin for payments because I'm paid in Bitcoin, but most people aren't paid in Bitcoin. And that's the thing with El Salvador as well, right? No one is paid in Bitcoin yet in El Salvador, so no one is really spending Bitcoin. The only people spending Bitcoin are the Bitcoin tourists coming in, or maybe some Americans or Europeans that, I don't know, I don't know, like the World Surf League hosted its first tournament in El Salvador for like 10 years because it left when the crime rate got really bad. And this is like another success story to Nayib Bukele. But so there's like lots of surfers that follow that tour. Like I've got friends here in Portugal that went to El Salvador before I did because they are surf fans as opposed to like Bitcoin fans, And so I was really keen to hear from them before I went to El Salvador. How was your experience? Did you pay in Bitcoin? Did it sort of orange pill you? And they're like, nah, just paid in dollars and, just got it done. And that was the easiest and most convenient thing. And yeah, I saw a few Bitcoin stickers here and there, but I don't really know how it works. I don't, care for how it works. And so it was like a slow thing. And it was a little bit frustrating for me as well, because obviously I'm trying my hardest to sort of orange pill them as well.
No, it just goes to show how early we are, really. It's just a reminder of how early we are, because it's easy to get trapped in when you're only consuming, or the vast majority of your day is just consuming Bitcoin content, whether it be podcasts, YouTube, or reading or whatever, and just being involved in Twitter. Sometimes you can get a distorted view about the spread of Bitcoin. Yep. And sometimes it's nice just to get reminded, actually, it's still early days, very early days. And it's nice to get somebody with your experience going around the world with the Bitcoin banner, banging that drum, but also being able to see in real life what impact Bitcoin is having. And I suppose the longer you do it and the more you're in this space, you start to see it increasing over time. So it must be a fascinating position for you to be in, just to sort of observe the world adopting Bitcoin. As slow as it is initially, I imagine it will reach a point where it just becomes, a sudden increase.
Yeah, I think the price is going to do a lot of that work as well, as unfortunately that is, or fortunately, I'm not sure, it is the best marketing tactic. And also shout out to Mike Still, because I did just completely steal his idea. I saw his videos prior to doing it myself, and then I got sort of thrust in the position of doing this. I basically did a street interview at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and that inspired this journey down the YouTube street interview rabbit hole. And prior to doing it, I reached out to Mike Still and was like, hey buddy, I know you do YouTube street videos, you do them about Bitcoin, you do them all around the UK, like I really like them. I was thinking about doing them myself, and all credit to him, he was like, yeah man, do it. Like it's a lonely thing out there, and it's really cool that you're interested. And since then we've been chatting, and he's a great guy, and yeah, he does also really good street. He also does them with a lot more money, so he gives out like 50 quid in Bitcoin, which is a lot more significant than me, who's doing it off my own back. So I'm usually giving out like a fiver if they're lucky in Bitcoin, because it's quite expensive to do this. And also I don't edit the videos myself. I pay a friend who's a Bitcoiner to edit them for me, and I don't want to rip him off. Like he has skills and he should be remunerated accordingly. And so yeah, I basically operate this whole thing at a loss, but so do you guys with this thing, I imagine. You're giving up your time, your energy, and whatever subscriptions you have to use to use this software. So I think that's also another amazing thing about the Bitcoin community, is the altruism, it's the generosity, it's the fact that we're all sacrificing weird things to further this movement. But again, that makes me wonder, am I mad? Have I put all my eggs in one basket, and am I putting too much hope on this one thing?
I think it helps having different, it will sound very cliche here, but it really helps having different interests. And I also think it helps to not just focus on like that one particular bubble. I, for example, I think I'm very privileged in that way, that I still am able to, like, obviously I have my Bitcoin clients, and you get paid in Bitcoin. You know, sometimes you can keep it, sometimes you need to exchange it to fiat. You still live a life, right, in the fiat landscape. But I also have the other side where I work for like a lot of fintechs. I work for basically family offices where I write content and help them educate people. And you get to see the best of both worlds, because that's what going to be very unpopular with a lot of toxic maxis. There are still normal people living in like the banking sector, in the media landscape, whatever it will be, who get Bitcoin, but they, you know, earn their salaries in fiat, in pounds, dollars, in euros, whatever. And they get that it might be a possibility to save up, but they look at it as an investment form. Which is why they compare the price. If it falls down 65%, you can tell them how all the best things in the world, like how this is good and people can accumulate and stuff. They still see it at a net loss of like 65% and not as a net benefit for maybe getting in cheaper for the next few bull runs. But yeah, is that something you would also say is an issue in the traditional media landscape? Because you were on that now famous panel in Amsterdam, which I also think is a good for Bitcoin, but we can discuss that later on. Do you think that's an issue, that a lot of these journalists, because generally they are generalists, they don't really focus on one particular thing. They look at it and they're like, oh, down 65% again, it's lost, it's dead, we can move on. Or is there maybe something else to that story?
Yeah, the generalist thing is interesting, right? And I even find that with my own job now. Like even at Cointelegraph, I'm supposed to write about crypto, but like anyone writing about crypto, like how on earth can you cover this industry, which covers everything from NFTs to DAOs to the new world preserved currency? It's impossible to be a generalist in crypto because you just can't keep up with it. There's too many things going on at any time. And so I wanted to double down on the Bitcoin side of things, but even within the world of Bitcoin, like I'm not up to speed, and I'd like to be, I'm acutely aware of my shortcomings, in the Bitcoin space. Like I'm still not up to speed on ordinals, for example, which is like the news of the past like 4 days. And, it feels like there's a new thing to be concerned about or to be aware of in the Bitcoin space every couple of days. I think that in the traditional journalism world, like when I used to cover, reporting around the world, like I was like an economic journalist. And, even when it comes to asking about the economy, it's such a broad term. If you're looking at, say, the Ivory Coast, are you looking at like is cocoa exports going down over time? Or are you looking at the educational level of like, or are you looking at the demographics of the country? There's so many things you can look at here. So when a term like Bitcoin or crypto comes up, there's no chance you're going to be a specialist on it. There's no chance you're going to be able to give an actual nuanced argument or a nuanced sort of explainer of what it is. And so that's what happened when I covered Bitcoin and crypto in 2018. I had a couple of articles that I wrote that were about how crypto use in Africa was on the rise. But my article was crap. Like looking back on it now, I've since removed my name from it because, I don't want that to be found. But it's how could I know the ins and outs of that? And it also makes me think, how could I accurately report on lots of things without having that, expert's insight into it? It makes me think that a lot of journalism nowadays is just like a bit crap. You might as well just rely on ChatGPT for your news for these sorts of things, rather than a journalist who's expected to know about 3,000 fields of study at any one moment. It's just it's ignorant of us to anticipate or to expect that these journalists would actually know what they're talking about. Like, why are we putting them on such a high pedestal in the first place? And so, it kind of, I think, your comments were leading to the panel with Jemima Kelly in Amsterdam. But it's funny, I'm actually hanging out with her in 2 weeks' time.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I genuinely believe, just before I leave the question to Ian, again, we all have different interests, different lives outside of stuff. And if you've ever been in the shoes, even something as simple, so I used to write for a think tank before I got started in sort of freelancing for family office and stuff. And one of the companies I was writing about was sponsoring that think tank. So like naturally, whatever I bring to my editor's table, he's going at like, okay, you can't do that because like they're paying our salaries essentially. So I think that's a big issue. A lot of people still forget that there are also relationships behind the scenes that are important to keep in face.
Yeah, exactly. and people forget that there's also a lot of relationships within the crypto space as well. Like I've had to write a few articles before because Cointelegraph has a relationship with certain people. So there's, I mean, this is the great thing about Bitcoin, right? It teaches you to be critical of certain things and to look behind headlines and to realize that, oh, okay, like the reason why this company is promoting X is because they've probably got ties with it as well.
Yeah.
But also, I think the pandemic woke up a lot of people to that as well. There's a lot of what's said in the media is crap.
It's interesting being in Amsterdam in the audience. I was a little bit full of indica when it was all unfolding, and it certainly woke me up. Particularly the amount of
looked at me like.
It's indica in the couch after all, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was certainly one of the highlights of Amsterdam, that panel, and you and Rizzo held strong. Really, it was nice for you just to sort of just let them really just sort of expose how ignorant, I suppose, they are to Bitcoin, but also at the same time, some forgiveness there from me, I suppose, because they're in a different world than we are. That they've got different pressures than we have, I suppose, particularly in their roles as journalists. So, it's a difficult one and a complicated one to sort of unpack, but it was certainly something that created a lot of discussion. Which is always a good thing, right? Discussion's always a good thing, no matter what side of the fence you're on. It's all bullish for Bitcoin in my mind. But on that point, what is it that we can, as Bitcoiners, can do better in the space for Bitcoin? How can we better bang that drum?
Yeah. Given that what you just said, relevant to people that are anti-Bitcoin, I guess with those kind of people, it's, be more patient, and eventually most people do come around to it. I'm still optimistic that people like Jemima Kelly, for example, will come around to Bitcoin. Right. But in the same breath, someone said this on Twitter recently, like Bitcoin adoption is kind of like triage during a war. Get the people that are, amputees or, having cardiac arrest, deal with those guys first, and then we'll deal with the walking wounded after that. And, I think that, my approach to Bitcoin has been like, who cares about Bitcoin in the West? In the UK as well, we've got a relatively stable currency that, yes, it trends to zero over time, but it's over quite a long period of time. And it's quite hard to sell Bitcoin to people and to promote it. And most people don't care about censorship resistance, even though we should, and it should be this, this human right, or, this tool for freedom. People aren't acutely aware of it the way that they, Canada kind of opened up people's eyes to it, like the SARS protests in Nigeria did. But again, it's still too far away from their present realities. So I think that we need to, well, what I'd like to do as well is to focus on places where they're going to get Bitcoin a bit quicker. And those tend to be in younger demographic places. Because just naturally it's a digital money, so it's harder for older people to get. No offense to any older people, but it's just one of those things, right? You
no offense taken.
The voice of the older people. And also go to places where they don't like their money. I mean, this is why I really love Bitcoin adoption in West Africa, because they genuinely hate their money. They see it as this colonial relic that is controlling them and that is making their lives uncomfortable. And so Bitcoin comes in, it's like, well, it literally does fix this. It's a better way of doing your affairs, and, money shouldn't be this monopoly. And if you can opt out and use Bitcoin, then good for you. So yeah, I think it's a question of sort of, if focusing your attentions on places where you can really make an effort and a difference, and also being more patient and being a bit more kind, lead with kindness with the people that are unfortunately still being obstreperous about fiat money. Like Jemima Kelly is a classic case. Like she's very clever. She knows she's got this job at the FT. It wouldn't look good for her if she came out as a Bitcoin believer, given that she's created this platform of being a Bitcoin hater. Like, she would have to manage that in a way that would be good PR for her or for her brand. She is still like quite a well-known writer at the FT. And so in order to make that switch, it would be, I don't know, like, do you think a Bitcoin company would really be rubbing their hands looking at her being like, yes, we want her to be, head up our content creation or our media arm if she was to suddenly flip on Bitcoin? Probably not, but the FT probably wouldn't want her either. Or maybe they would. I don't know how this plays out, but it would be, she's got a lot more on the line. She's got a lot more to lose, given that the fiat position that she has right now, rather than me. Like, I was a nobody journalist bouncing around the world before I flipped into Bitcoin, so I didn't have as much to lose. So, it kind of makes sense as to the incentives there. But yeah, lead with kindness and focus your attention on the walking wounded of the fiat world.
If you manage to convince her to receive some sats, we'll match that amount, Joel. Here,
I've literally tried 3 times. I tried once on the roof of the FT office in London, which is an amazing office, like incredible space. Tried again in Amsterdam, and then I tried once over the phone. And I'm going to try, obviously, again in 2 weeks' time in Barcelona. There's this like blockchain convention, shitcoin thing in Barcelona. So yeah, some people, eh?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a good point before we get to the closing question, because you see what Isabella did, for example. That was the second person from the FT, let's call it, even though she's doing her own thing now. You would almost go down this route where you give up your position at FT and then go into the scary thing of trying to do it on your own with no resources, no access. So that's a real scary part. But have you actually spoken to her as well? Because I think like
Isabella Kaminska.
She's slowly coming around.
Yeah, she's. Rizzo calls her a doom coiner. So the idea that this realization that fiat is doomed and Bitcoin could be the way out. But again, it doesn't sort of play a role in her sort of personal brand. Like she left the FT or Alphaville, which is what Jemima actually works for as well, and set up her own thing, and then started talking more openly about Bitcoin. So again, what does that say about the ability to write about Bitcoin at the FT? It doesn't seem like it's part of their agenda. And I've seen this with Scott Cipollina, who used to work for Decrypt, so used to be a crypto writer. He got a job at the FT, and it's hilarious because his writing has gone way more scathing and way more skeptical of crypto and Bitcoin since writing for the FT. So again, there's a reason why there's an editor and an editorial body and an editorial team that looks at your work and changes the way that it sounds, and either you go along with that and realize, okay, this is the voice that they want me to use, or it gets edited that way anyway. But you're still a cog in that machine, in that journalistic body. So it's worth considering. But yeah, she's coming around to Bitcoin, and I think it's unrealistic to think that everybody in the world is going to become this ardent Bitcoin maximalist that holds their own keys and that sort of thing. I'd love it, but it's diversity is also key to Bitcoin. And having Isabella on, I think she's team Bitcoin. Let's be honest, like the way in which she talks about things as well, and her own sort of experience of seeing how I think it was her grandparents fled like the USSR. She was saying like, wouldn't it be amazing if Bitcoin was back then? And that's like, well, yeah, she gets it. She realizes that, this unconfiscatable money that you can travel with, take 12 words, walk all over the world with, it's really useful. And it's there in those times of need. So again, it's this doom coiner narrative. But hey, if that's what Orange pills you, then I'll take it.
Yeah, everyone has their different journeys into Bitcoin. Joe, before we close up, is there anything in particular we forgot to mention, or you would like the listeners to be sent out into the abyss of every podcasting player out there?
Oh, thanks. No, it's nice you asked, actually, because I'm trying to work out how to get Bitcoin content out there. And obviously, for the past 5-6 years, I've been writing, but not a lot of people have time to read, and also not a lot of people like to read or have the concentration span at the end of a work day to do so. So hence why I sort of pivoted more into video. I'm trying to experiment with shorts and stuff. And with Cointelegraph as well, they have this great big video resource arm. So I've been like, can we make more Bitcoin content? And I've been doing that more and more on the Cointelegraph YouTube channel. And one of the big things that I'm really looking forward to its release, and I'm getting more and more proud of, which is actually quite cool, is this Bitcoin mining documentary in Ireland, where
nice.
I think that the title of it is going to be like turning cow shit into digital gold, or cow pat into digital gold, something along those lines. So I would really encourage people to check that out, because it should be out end of February or early March latest, depends on the various drafts and things. And I'm trying to work out if that is a good way of getting, Bitcoin adoption out there. And the idea is that you can send this to your mum or your auntie or, your granddad, and they will still consume this and be like, you know what, that was quite entertaining. It was, nice to look at, nice pretty drone shots of Ireland. It felt like something we can relate to, because a lot of these things, when people talk about flaring methane gas emissions in the US, I'm like, I'd never seen one of those, sort of, what do they call those? What's the name of those gas things that go up and down? This is really bad knowledge from me. But I'd never seen one until I'd been to the US myself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those things.
Those donkeys?
I don't know what they're called. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So a lot of the the Bitcoin media is quite Americanized. So I think having those local touch points really helps. And this is one of the things I'm trying to promote. So if you like it, let me know, DM me or whatever, and I'll try to make more of that content. I mean, likewise for my street stuff, my street videos, I'm trying to make this content which is more shareable and more easy to consume. So I'd love to hear feedback on that sort of thing. And yeah, my Twitter DMs are open. So feel free to let me know. But yeah, and to anyone listening, yeah, just keep going. There is a light in the tunnel, and it is Bitcoin.
That's a perfect ending then. Joe, very much thank you for being on, being so open. And I think you'll definitely be back soon in the future, because there's definitely a follow-up for a lot of what we discussed today.
When I start shitcoining.
I don't know. You said it.
Joe, it's been brilliant. Thank you, buddy. Cheers,
Thanks,
pal.
Ian. Lovely to chat to you both. Thanks, Joel. Cheers, Ian. Best of luck with Rabbit Hole Stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or Rabbit Hole Tales on Twitter.
There you go. We don't need to link anything. Cheers.